We have breaking news today. Early on August 24th, 1970, a van loaded with 6 barrels of explosives blew outside the east wing of Sterlinghall at the University Wisconsin campus in Madison. The bombing was carried out by 4 men in protest of Americans' involvement in the Vietnam War. The bombing was directed against the Mathematics Research Center, a U.S. Army-funded facility, which was located in the east wing of Sterlinghall, along with the physics and astronomy departments. Army Math, as it was known, was despised by many anti-war activists who felt the center was contributing to the death and destruction in Southeast Asia through its research. They felt it had no place on a public university campus. Less than a week and a half after the act, the FBI had pieced together what happened and put 4 men on their most wanted list: 23-year-old Cartland Armstrong and his 19-year-old brother Dwight from Madison, 18-year-old David Fine from Delaware, and 22-year-old Leo Burt from Harvardtown, Pennsylvania. Fine and Burt were both students at Wisconsin. Cart had been on again, off again student in previous years. The Armstrongs and Fine were eventually caught, convicted, and served time in prison, but Leo Burt had never been found. Carl was the oldest of the bombers, and he had been admitted into the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 1964. He was radicalized by the Vietnam War and quit school a year later. He took on odd jobs for the next few years and was reaccepted into the university in 1967. That fall, he was witness to violence between protesters and police on October 18, 1967, when the Dow Chemical Company arranged for job interviews with students on campus, and many students protested and blocked potential interviewers from the building where the interviewers were being held. After the bombing, he went into hiding until he was caught on February 16, 1972, in Toronto. He was sentenced to 23 years in prison, but served only 7 years. After his release, Armstrong returned to Madison, where he operated a juice cart called Louis Juice on the Library Mall, just 4 blocks away from Sterlinghall. In early 2000s, he also owned a deli called Radical Right on State Street near UW-Madison campuses until it was displaced by the development of the overturned center. In 1986 interview about the attack, Armstrong said, "I still feel we can't radicalize someone getting killed, but at the time we felt we should never have been done the bombing at all. Now I don't feel that way. I feel it was justified. I should have just been done. It just should have been done more responsibly." Leo was 22 years old and worked only on the Daily Cardinal. Burt came to Wisconsin following his interest in crew. He introduced David Fine and Carl Armstrong to each other in July 1970. After the bombing, Burt fled to Canada with Fine, and as of September 2010, remains a large through at the time that there were new leads and possible whereabouts. Some of the casualties in this explosion were Robert. He was a 33-year-old postdoctoral researcher at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. On the night and early morning of August 23rd through 24th, 1970, he had gone in the lab to finish up work before leaving on a family vacation. He was involved in research in the field of superconductivity. At the time of the explosion, he was in the lab located on the basement level of Sterlinghall. He was monitoring an experiment when the explosion occurred. Rescuers found him face down in about a foot of water. He was dead. He had a wife, Stephanie, and 3 other children, a 3-year-old son, Christopher, and 2 twin-year-old daughters. Some of the injured in the bombing were Paul Quinn, David Shusker, and Norbert Soliter. Shusker was a South African graduate student. He was the most serious injured out of the three. He suffered broken shoulder, fractured ribs, and a broken eardrum. He was buried in the rubble for about 3 hours before being rescued by firefighters. Quinn, a postdoctoral physics researcher, and Slutter, a university security officer, suffered cuts from shattered glass and bruises. For many years, there was no physical public memorial for Robert Fash's death, either in Sterlinghall or on campus. However, in 2001, a number of plaques were installed at UW-Madison to recall the history of the campus. One plaque located between Bascom Hall and Burgee Hall is titled Reform and Revolt and mentions the Sterlinghall bombing and notes the explosion killed a physicist researcher.